All right, folks, really excited to share today's guest. We've got Ben Colgate, who is from the UK. I've been following Ben for probably a year and a half, maybe even 2 years now on Instagram, and I really like his approach to movement. He's putting out some really simple, effective, engaging content, and I just wanted to get him on and to pick his brain on his background, how he got into the industry, and how he got into doing the type of coaching he's doing today. So, Ben, thanks for jumping on, man.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
Awesome, mate. So, for people who don't know anything about you, like, do you want to maybe start like how you got into the industry, who you are, where you're based, and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I got into the industry in around 2014. So I came out of I was in a job, just like a sales job, basically. So I was kind of like I fell into that essentially and was getting to a point where it was just a job. And I felt like there was nowhere really to go. Um, so for me, it was, and I've always had an interest in training and that side of things. It's always been something it's always been on my radar and things that I've sort of pursued alongside that. So I kind of like took the leap away from the job that I was in. Just thought, right, I'm going to give personal training a crack. I feel like that's a direction that I need to explore, and it was something I considered during this job. But anyway, so in 2014 was when I qualified as a personal trainer. So quite some time ago now. And I started out in David Lloyd in Farnham. And I spent a couple of years there and just kind of finding my feet, going straight from course to being employed by them. And yeah, I guess that's where I kind of started on this journey. I think it was an interest to me to learn how to help others. I think is the main thing, and also learning from others in ways of improving myself in terms of like I guess physical ability. So I started training when I was prior to that I'm 36 now, so I was starting the gym when I was around 18, 19. And kind of like as most guys do at that age, I think, just like go to the gym with your mates, throwing a few weights around, trying to make it look like you know what you're doing. All with that kind of, I guess, mindset behind wanting to be bigger, wanting to be stronger, very kind of athletically driven by appearance. And I think most teenage guys, even like now, maybe even younger than I was, were kind of in that boat. So kind of combining a bit of experience there, probably 8 years prior to actually becoming a PT. And then along the road, I just kind of felt like I think it was actually a yoga class that I went to whilst I was working at the gym. And I've kind of gone from lifting weights in a very linear fashion to then trying to move my body a little more three-dimensional, although it's kind of on a mat, but still you're in quite a small space. And I was like, man, this is not good. Like I just felt like everything was just so difficult. Just holding these poses, transitioning from different positions, and it was just a real shake up to me. And I kind of took that as first of all as a bit of, I think, like a shock, a bit of a realization that I couldn't really use my body in the way that I felt I could after banking years of training essentially. So yeah, so I guess I always had this kind of curiosity around that kind of side of things in the background. Like I always appreciated like seeing gymnastics, for example, and like calisthenics was another thing that kind of cropped up as I was in my first sort of couple of years really as a personal trainer. So I kind of started to steer my interests and also my approach towards others in this kind of way of like we can look if people having a lot of the time as well. I think being a personal trainer in that time, 95% of people that were going to the gym wanted to lose weight. That was kind of the main focus around what a lot of people had. And losing weight obviously it's a goal. It's important to people. It can improve so many aspects of somebody's life. But I felt like I wanted to help people and also myself in creating a body that that could be used, that it could be applied to something and kind of free it from these niggles and pains and restrictions essentially that I just had picked up along the way. And as I said about that class that I went to, that was kind of like a bit of an eye-opener to me of like, okay, I feel like in terms of aesthetically, I felt quite comfortable, and I liked the fact that at least I felt strong for in terms of like moving load and all those kind of things. But the actual use of my body was kind of not completely useless, but it was just a sign that I really needed to just do something about it. So yeah, I guess that's maybe a bit of a drawn out story of where I've kind of come from, where I am now. But yeah, that's where my interests lie now, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it's very kind of similar to myself actually. Yoga was kind of the door that kind of opened up a lot of things. But the point you made there, like create a body that can be used, like it's so obvious, but like you're saying, you know, you're training since you're 18, 19, banking hours and hours and hours, and then you go to this one class of a different kind of discipline, you're like, I can't do anything. Like this body, all this muscle is kind of useless. And
Mm.
I think a lot of people, you're probably younger than, you know, I talk to a lot of guys now who I work with, and they're kind of 30s and beyond that, and they're getting that realization then. But like for yourself, like you got that realization going into yoga. um did you kind of deep dive into yoga then, or like, because the type of, I guess you would be classified as like a movement coach, but like tell us about that kind of trajectory. So you went from kind of, you know, lifting weights, kind of the same as most guys in their late teens, 20s, did yoga, realize your movement is very bad, and then like what happened next?
So yeah, I never really got too deep into yoga. I think at the gym I was at the time, there was a guy teaching there, who I kind of took, you know, some sort of early sort of stage inspiration from. He had been teaching for, must have been around 20 years at that point, and he was telling me about his backstory and kind of going from, you know, not even be able to sit into a squat, and for a guy that was probably in his, I don't know, mid 40s, you know, just like had such a great range of movement that he could control. And so, but I never really followed that in terms of a practice. I did practice yoga here and there, because I left that gym and I was taking some classes for another, and then this same teacher kind of moved over, and he was taking something there, so I would just kind of jump in his class after I'd finished teaching one, kind of thing. So that's kind of as far as the yoga practice kind of went. I think the thing that really sort of opened my eyes up to movement was coming across Ido Portal. And I think from coming across, just listening to his perspective, and I think seeing the way that he moved, how he would kind of, the layers ran so deep in his perception towards a body, like human movement, and even I guess the mind, in the way that it kind of interlinks with that as well. So I feel like he played quite a big influence in terms of that kind of change in direction, I think, or at least the curiosity around exploring, you know, what a body can actually do and how it can apply itself. And one thing that really stands out to me, and that I talk to people a lot about, especially clients, is when age comes up, it's like, oh, I'm getting old, Ben, or, you know, it's like, oh, you wait till you hit your 40s or 50s. And I think over the last few years, my own practice, and it hasn't really been following anything particularly strict, but I feel like from where I was in that mid-20s age to now, you know, like closer to 40s, I feel like I can move better now, but I'm 10 years older. So I'm
Mm.
kind of like, it's a big focus of mine, and trying to relay that message in your body is, it's a product of a period of time we have served, as opposed to being defined by an age. And I feel like that's something I remind myself of a lot. And I feel like if I can do it, you know, I'm a human being. Yeah, I've probably trained more than most of my clients that come to me or others around me. It's like just general gym goers. But at the same time, I feel like if I can make my own body feel like that, not without, some learning and getting things wrong and that kind of stuff along the way. But I feel like if I can get myself to that point, I don't see why that can't continue and why others can't get there. So yeah, so I feel like that my influences, I guess, are along, I guess, like gymnastic strength training, like elements of calisthenics, I guess, not necessarily strictly, but there's just a bit of a pool of like strength training, like mobility and flexibility, and then movement, I guess, which I've done a bit of over the last couple of years. So yeah, a bit of a few different
Yeah,
things
like
really.
you made a really good point there, just around the mindset. Like I get this a lot with clients as well. Like just wear and tear. Like I'm getting old, and it's like you haven't done anything to reverse this stuff, and people don't realize how much power and autonomy that they can actually have on their bodies if they start doing the right things consistently, right? So I think that's a
Mm.
really important thing to reinforce. Um, it's super interesting as well. Like Ito has had such an impact, man. Like he's just so many amazing coaches have come from his inspiration, which is pretty profound. Like a very different industry now if he didn't blow up like over the last whatever 10, 15 years, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think there are others along the way. So I think it was around the time, it may have even been when Edo was working with Conor McGregor.
Hmm.
It was around that kind of time. So I remember seeing like quotes of Conor McGregor's of coming around and some of the things that he was saying. And I think Edo was helping him around that time. And I came across another guy who I still follow him pretty closely now, and it's been few years, but a guy in London called Alex Nino. Whether you
Oh,
know or not.
he's like in his well into his 40s, isn't he?
Yeah, I think like mid 40s maybe now, or at least steering that way. And I came again like the wonderful world of Instagram. I came across him, and I was just got drawn into his ability. Um, and he was only getting older, but his
Yeah.
body was improving. And I was kind of like, I think that was probably a side of yoga at the gym. I think when I came across Alex, I was like, I just found it incredible that you've only added years to your life, but your body is way more capable than it was before. So it was kind of like, I think that's where the age thing really stuck with me. Not necessarily directly comparing it to him, but I feel like a lot of people I work with are older than me. Some are younger, and they're even with in terms of like just base levels of range of movement and stuff. It's like I mean I've seen kids that kids of clients in their 12, 13 years old that can barely even touch their shins, and it's like I feel like seeing that almost just keeps the fire burning. I think in like I wouldn't want my kids necessarily to be like that. I don't want to be like that myself, and certainly I want to be using my body into for many years to come. So but yeah, Alex was and continues to be a big influence to me, I think, in just seeing what he can still do, which yeah, it looks to keep on improving really.
Yeah, I think it's really good to because you can see a guy who's 25 or 30 or 35 and he's doing amazing things, but like let's talk when you're 45, 50, 55, 60. So like I did a do you know Kit Lachlan?
Yeah, I've heard of him, but I don't know him much about him.
He's not because he's not that big on Instagram. He was very big on YouTube for a while. Like he's stretch therapy. So like Emmett Lewis would be one of his students. But Kid I think is nearly 70 now. Like he's definitely well into his 60s, still
Wow.
moving very well. Then like Steve Maxwell will be another guy. I think Steve Maxwell's 71 now. So it's I like kind of Dan. Do you know Dan John? He'd be more like the traditional strength and conditioning world, but he'd be in his mid 60s. He'd be kind of a proper OG like in the fitness industry.
Yeah.
Um, but just they've shown like, all right, we've been doing this for decades and we're still doing pretty impressive stuff. Like, so it's really great to just like listen to those people, because like their systems, their methods, they're tried and tested, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I went to one of Emmett Lewis's workshops. He held one at Local by Motion in Local Motion. No, so yeah, so I'm thinking there's somebody else on Instagram. Local Motion in Wandsworth, I think it is Wandsworth, or Richmond. But anyway, that was Tom Merrick, the bodyweight warrior. I think I'd seen that he referenced him quite a lot, and I think he helped him a lot on his journey. And also went to one of Tom's workshops as well in London. So yeah, so Emmett Lewis, Tom Merrick. Yeah, I think Tom teaches a lot of principles that Emmett taught him, and I think the same with Erdy as well. I think he's referenced Emmett quite a lot. I think
Yeah.
he's worked with him as well
Yeah.
over the last sort of few years or so. So yeah, it's something as well. Yeah, he's always on my radar, Emmett. Just yeah, he's showcasing some rough. He's got a great team of people as well that just kind of spreading the word of you can improve. You know, it's just a matter of time, really.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna try and get him on the podcast. I didn't know anything about him because I lived in Australia for a long time, but he's an Irishman as well, so I need to chat to him at some point.
Yeah,
Let's talk about, like, for people listening, you're saying, okay, like, you're 36 now, you're feeling better now than you did a decade before, and you've no plan of, you're thinking this is just going to keep going to a certain point, like within reason, but like you feel like, okay, when you're 40, you're going to be more flexible, stronger than you are today. What are some of those principles that like you're applying now, that you're doing yourself, you're also teaching clients, that you were completely neglecting, and you see a lot of people doing completely the opposite, online or in the gym?
yeah. I think I think in the industry itself, and it's one of those things like over time. I think being a personal trainer, you're working within the fitness industry as it's kind of labeled, but I kind of feel like as the years have passed, I don't feel I really belong in that industry, if that kind of makes sense. Just for the kind of things that I feel the industry sort of breeds as beliefs and even principles, I guess. So things like, I don't know, like the lots of short-term transformation promises, lots of ego. I think, and I think with that, it almost creates a bit of a negative impact in terms of, like, we have these these images of perfect bodies that are promoting certain products and all of this kind of stuff. And I kind of feel I've steered away. No, I wasn't ever really there, but I feel like that there's a lot of that falls under this fitness umbrella of like quick fix, promotion, all of this kind of stuff. So I feel at the things that I guess, learned over the years, and things that I've tried myself and see other people doing, it's I think just combining those things of like being strong, like feeling capable, having a range of movement that allows possibility to then feed into movement. So things like even just simple stuff, but like as some principles that I learned from I did some coaching with for a while, Jason Round, so Move More MP on Instagram. Again, went to a couple of his workshops and did some one-to-one, like some online coaching with him, just to learn like floor communication and locomotion and spine movement and all these kind of things that I feel have just all fed the funnel for me, and where I've just gained probably a drop in the ocean's worth of experience, really, compared to someone like Jason or someone like Ido. But I think that, and as you mentioned, like with this kind of trajectory of age, of like this kind of keep climbing. I don't think it will be. I'm not really under the impression that it will be a forever lasting thing. I feel like you will have to adapt. That you'll get to a point where you probably won't be able to lift the same amount of weight. You won't have the ability to do certain things, but just like taking someone from the very beginning on their journey to achieving more flexibility, improving their strength, being able to move better. Everything from that point at the start to wherever they get to, maybe it's 18 months, maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 5 years, but everything at that point starts at the bottom end of that scale, and things grow and adapt as the person moves up that scale. They'll take some left turns and maybe some, side steps and so on along the way to figure things out and what works for that person. But I feel like there's always a way of adapting something. And I think time is better spent on those things as opposed to just, pulling the age card and just being like, man, I can't possibly do that I'm mid 40s now, or don't expect me to do that. I'm nearly 50. It's kind of that mindset, and I think that comes from society. I feel like this kind of, it gets bolstered by, like if one person is standing in a group of 10 people and they're like, oh god, my hips feeling a bit sore now, must be because I'm in my 50s, and then those 10 people probably join 10 other groups of people, and that it just spreads like wildfire. And I think it just kind of bolsters this belief around, you can't do anything. The older you get, things just get worse. Whereas, I feel like although I haven't lived, past 36 years, but I think
yeah,
at
35 year
least
old,
being
36
10
year old.
yeah, exactly. And I get that a lot, just like if it's something, as a Facebook post I put out around like something for later life, was kind of the title, and it was just showing like me getting to the floor and standing back up. But it got kind of a lot of mixed feedback, especially from an older generation. But well, how am I supposed to do that with like I've had a knee replacement, or my hips won't let me do that, and all this kind of thing. And it's not like, I think some people just hold that they have an immediate defense because of maybe something they have experienced, or maybe they feel they've left it too late. But but that's not for everybody. And I feel like and I also had people introducing themselves. It was like, hi, I'm Doreen, 68, and I've had like a double knee replacement. And then through the comments, it was almost like setting a bit of a standard. Like people just it was like, I'm X amount old, and I've had this, and I can't possibly do that. And it was just it was really interesting to see. And it was like, oh yeah, you wait till you get my age and you're only young, and this, it was all these young people telling us how to move properly and stuff. And it's,
Yeah.
some people already had that in their heads, and I think they're the ones where we're not going to have much impact on changing those people's minds. But I think if people just remain open-minded, like be curious, like wonder why that person's saying that, or like, is it really because of my age, or is it the lack of things that I haven't done up until this point? So I think there's a bit of that. But yeah, to me, everything is adaptable, and I've learned that from working with clients. I learned that from working with myself, like learning from other people. There's always a way of doing something. And even whether that's getting up off the floor, when you need a hand on something, it doesn't mean you can't practice that. Like practice that 20 times a day if you need to. It will still give you the ability to get off the ground easier. It's just that there's always a way of, there's always a way. It's just being open-minded enough, I think, to accept that maybe you just need to try something different rather than just going off of what you see for face value.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one because obviously, like, again, I'm 35, you're 36. It's like, yeah, it's hard to be like in someone's head who's 60s. They've been, born in the UK or Ireland or some Western country, and I think the environmental impact is something that I'm fascinated with in cultures. So like, I spent 2 years in Southeast Asia in 2014-15. I was teaching English there for 2 years, and I couldn't believe how I was like, people move so well. Like everyone's like able to sit on the ground for hours, no problem. Squat, obviously, squat toilets were everywhere. Like I was in India and Thailand, and I was like, this isn't like young people. These are people like in their 70s, and they're squatting, they're sitting on the ground. And it's like, it's because they've been doing that forever. Like you said, like it's just every single day repeatedly, versus you're in the UK, you're in Ireland, you go to school, and then you have been on the ground in 2 decades, 3 decades, 5 decades. So then it becomes this crazy thing to be able to get up and down off the ground or sit on the ground because you haven't done it for decades. So I think that's super interesting. But like, let's just say someone's listening, they're 50, and or let's just say someone comes to you and they're like 50, a guy, busy family, busy job, stressed, and he's just kind of had a normal 50-year-old's life. Like he wasn't squatting, and sitting on the ground. What would be kind of three big nuggets you could kind of share with that person that, it's not crazy. It's like something that they could actually start doing, just listening to this podcast and actually start taking action on like this week.
Yeah, I think that the first place I start with anybody, I think, regardless of age, is obviously finding out more about where they want to go and what's important to them and all of those kind of things. But I like to see where someone's at visually, just in terms of like just a basic movement assessment of seeing how does your, like, looking at the spine, the hips and the shoulders. So I think for anybody listening, I think if you have the opportunity to be able to check those things out, I would say, like, look at where you're, just strip everything back. Don't worry about I want to lose 2 stone, or I want to be able to touch my toes, all of these kind of things. I think you just need to embrace being the beginner. Like, don't worry about that you've banked 50 years of life. Like, just take it as, just start with a blank canvas. Just see where you're at from a real base level of movement. So I think for somebody maybe who doesn't want to go that far, or that doesn't quite sort of, it's not kind of maybe not an accessible thing. I think, I don't know, there are always ways, I think, of like, you'll always have some kind of reference to knowing like how you feel, or maybe where you want to go and where you're starting from. And I think it's just starting small as well. Like, just try not to bite off more than you can chew. If it's someone, I work with quite a wide variety of people, so it's kind of not, I want to be able to do a pull-up, or I want a gymnastics bridge, or I want to, be able to move well around the ground. But that's not, that's not always what people come to me for. Maybe someone they're coming back from an injury and they want to build back up to doing 5K, or they want to be able to move around well with their kids. So I just, I think without knowing those kind of things, it's difficult to really, it's
Let's make
difficult
it
to kind
a
of
bit clearer.
suggest anything specific.
Let's make it a bit clearer. So let's just say Jim, he's 50 and he's got a bum shoulder and a sore hip, and he wants to get back playing tennis with his friends from work. So what would you say, like, 2 or 3 simple things he could just start doing right away, basically?
Start doing, well, moving, I guess, like just like, I don't, yeah, I mean, I think that's something people just don't do enough of. And I think that's probably why Jim might be in that situation anyway. It might not just be the fact that he's gone for, he's gone for a tough shot on the tennis court. Like, there's probably years of not doing stuff that might have just led to that point. So I think, if anybody listening, they, like, I would just look at them, like, break the body down into shoulders, spine, and hips. Move in the directions you feel that are available. Pay attention to the ones that aren't. Like, YouTube's a great thing for stuff as well, like for just immediate insight to something, just to try and like, I think you can't really steer too far wrong from movement. I mean, it's quite, I think it's quite a difficult question. I feel like, it just needs to move more, basically.
Yeah.
That'll answer, I think, a lot of a lot of problems.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like getting into the habit of just walking more if they're not very active, that would be like a first step, I guess, because at least when you're walking, you're not slouched over a desk. So that is going to help your shoulders as well. or it's going to reduce the kind of those poor positions that you're in at the very least, right?
I think taking an overall look at like how you spend most of your time, I think that's probably the way that I would look at it is like, do you spend 10 hours a day sitting down? Well, for starters, just break that up, like break up
Mm.
by just standing every hour, or think of the way the body is positioned for those hours. So kind of 90 degrees at the hips, shoulders, arms reaching forward, like rounded thoracic spine, like sending the body in the other direction. I think you don't necessarily need to have too much guidance or education around that so much. I think if my arm spends so much time in this position in front of me, how about taking it behind me, even if I was just holding on to the stair banister, or like a table bridge from the floor, for example, just feet flat, hands behind, raising the hips, just like simple like things you can do more or less immediately, I think, to just try and counter the hours that the body has been in for long periods of time. I think that's one thing that I would try and introduce to anyone of that kind of age. I think that would come to me. It was just looking at how can we kind of counter the all of this time that you're putting the body in, you know.
Yeah, that was a really good point actually about the reverse tabletop or reverse bridge, because you're kind of doing the opposite to someone who's driving all day, which I think a lot of people are. Um, so that's like a really, yeah. So just walk more, do something like a reverse tabletop, and break up your day. So instead of sitting for 10 hours, you're every
Yeah, I think
hour
that's
just
it. I
go
think,
for a walk.
yeah, just simple stuff. Yeah, I think simple stuff that you can implement immediately, you know, like everybody has the opportunity to stand up from their desk, you know, like there's nothing that can draw you in that much, I don't think personally, where you can't stand up for 5 minutes or take a call standing up rather than sitting down, or even just like I am now, I've got my phone set up in front of me with you and I'm sat on the floor and just changing leg positions, you know, just like breaking up the way the body spends a lot of its time that possibly could have led to, you know, that shoulder issue or that hip feeling tight, because the body's chances are it's spent so much time in one particular position. So yeah, I think just sitting on the floor, I think, is just one thing that people just don't do enough of. Like if I'm watching TV, I just try and just sit in different positions, like 90-90, or, you know, like a seated straddle, kneeling, sitting on my feet, and just switching between those things. That's something I know that's worked for me. So which would probably be quite tough maybe for someone in their 50s if they've never done it before. But like I said, everything's adaptable. You can have, you know, like a foam roller next to you to lean on, or even the side of the sofa, or, you know, a book to prop yourself up with the hand. You know, I think that there's always a way of doing something. It's just finding where you're at, starting small, and just building on it from there.
Yeah, man, I love what you said about just like us everyone, well, not everyone, but I think a lot of people, they're on the couch in the evening for many hours and at the weekend. So like if that's going to be happening, if you're being honest with yourself, going forwards for the rest of your life, and you just start literally doing what you outlined, like, okay, I'm going to sit like I normally do, but then for 5 minutes, I'm going to, cross-legged sit or straddle or something. Like the impact
Yeah,
that'll have over years is crazy. So like, it's just a really simple thing that people can start doing right away. So yeah, that's great, mate. Let's jump into something that you've changed your mind on recently. And recently, we can say the last like 12 months, we'll say.
yeah, it's an interesting one. I think in the last 12, well, maybe even more recent than the last 12 months. And I'm not sure if it's necessarily changed my mind. I feel like I've started to listen to a lot of podcasts. And I feel like there's just a lot of perspectives within those podcasts that I think that kind of some maybe kind of bolster beliefs that I already have. But I think some are really interesting in the way, that whether it's an athlete, whether it's a business person, whether it's a journalist, I feel like they all have ups and downs. They all have struggles. They all have ways of, they reach some pretty dark points, you know, in some cases, but there's this overcoming. And I feel like sometimes, especially with myself, I think I can get quite bogged down in overthinking and, you know, trying to be the perfectionist and, you know, trying to do everything spot on the first time round, otherwise it's kind of not valid. And I feel like the more I listen to all of these people, these come from different walks of life, they go into different things, like achieved amazing things, but even, you know, with those highs there come lows. And I think definitely in the last probably 3 to 6 months, I think of just picking up, you know, like just little things of not being afraid to fail. I think is probably one of the biggest things, the standout things. Like, don't worry if you get something wrong, you know. And I think I think like physically, I don't feel I don't feel it kind of has manifested so much maybe in things that I've tried to achieve, like physically. I think I've been quite, I mean, I've stuck at trying to learn, you know, learning handstands and playing around with that side of the practice for probably 5 or so years. And I think if you weren't scared to fail, I don't think anybody would stick at it for that long. You know, like you could be practicing handstands for, I don't know, 3+ years, and on one, you know, like 3 years in a day, it's like I can't even kick up. You know, it's just like something you just throw you a curveball, but you just think, okay, well, there's always tomorrow and that kind of thing. So I think in a physical kind of practice, there have been some frustrations, but I feel like that there's me overcoming that hasn't been sort of so hard. I think maybe it's just other things, you know, where you maybe in line of work, or that you know, before putting a post out, you want to make sure it's perfect, or the angle of a video or something, you know. There's always this kind of like, I want to get it right first time, but I think it's just better to put something out there, you know. It's out, you can refine it later. The most important thing is getting it out there. So I think, yeah, I think having not listened to, you know, lots of different people, especially over the last sort of 3 months or so, I think I probably would still be doing that, you know. And I still get stuck in those cycles. I still get stuck in those cycles of thinking, you know, yeah, just you want to, you always want to, because you're kind of on a stage in a sense, you want to just put something out there that's kind of like this deep thought to it, and you kind of want to cover all bases. But I feel like, you know, no one is thinking that, no one is in your mind knowing what you're thinking, if that makes sense. When you're writing out these things, it's better just to put something out there, and, you know, one slice of the pie rather than trying to give the whole thing at once, you know. So yeah, I think that's probably a good insight to that side of things, I think.
Yeah, man, that's a really good share, mate. So like just fear of failure, and then I guess from the podcast you're saying, well, everyone fails. In fact, the most successful people seem to have failed the most, which I think is a really important point that a lot of people don't realize or remember. But would you say it's coming up, or it has been coming up mostly in like social media and like how you're being perceived or how you think you're being perceived, or is it other areas as well?
Yeah, maybe it's the, yeah, I think I think when you're especially when you're sharing more and more ideas, and you see, you know, you notice your following's kind of like growing. Although, you know, and I've always kind of had in the back of my mind, it doesn't really matter. I'm not focusing on, you know, 100,000 followers. Okay, cool. Like celebrating that kind of thing. It's more, I feel like when something goes out there, I feel like I just want to know that I've done a good job. I've done my best at that. Whereas I think it's much more important to be 80% of that, you know, and just, you can always do a post in 10 days time, and, you know, you can make up that 20%, or even if it's the 10 of the 20 that's left, you know. So yeah, I think it's just I think having that sense of you are getting in front of more eyes. Not everybody's going to agree with you either, which is fine. Sometimes I think early on, you know, you get some pretty weird and wonderful comments and messages and whatever, which have got nothing to do with the message you're trying to put out there. And in the past, you know, you get frustrated with it. I'll be like, my wife would be like, what is this all about? Like, I want to reply or whatever, and you kind of just get sucked into this, like these little online sort of, I don't know, trying to prove a point or whatever. And I think I've just learned more and more recently of just like, yeah, whatever, just have a bit of fun with it or just let it slide. And yeah, so I think maybe that, yeah, probably a bit to do with, I think, hearing other people talk about perfectionism and overthinking and imposter syndrome, all of these kind of things that once they're being spoken about and the different facets of those, I feel like some of those have just like on a bit of self-discovery of like, yeah, I do have those things going on that I want to just try and, yeah, not let them dominate, and just sort of just go with the flow a bit more, just share stuff if someone doesn't agree with it, as long as you're putting it out there with good intentions, you know, with something that's benefited you and you know that it could maybe help others, then I feel like that's just the way to put it, rather than just it has to be right, you know, from every facet of science, you know, or back it up with 20 years worth of research. You know, if something you've practiced for so many years and it's worked for you, I think that's something that's worth sharing.
Yeah, for sure, man. And it's like, you know, in particular, like your content, it's very much like making people's lives better. It's not like sharing these crazy facts or, you know, disinformation or whatever. Like anytime on your page, I'm just like, this is lovely. Like this is a really nice routine that he's sharing again today, you know? So yeah, I'm glad that you're not overthinking it, man,
Yeah.
because it's definitely, you know, social media, you're basically helping people move better. So it's a very good way to be. Let's move into some rapid fire, mate, to finish off because we're coming up to. I'm just conscious of your time, mate. Um, if you could sit down with anyone in the world for 3 hours over dinner, who would it be and why?
No, I've got a couple of names here. I did a little bit of pre-thinking before coming on, but I think if I could, it's hard between two people. I think like Denzel Washington would be
Oh
the
yeah,
probably such a great 3 hours.
yeah,
And my second, if yeah, I'll chuck in my second was probably Will Smith. I think I listened to his audiobook and I just loved it. And it was just such a listening to all those kind of like all his past, all his experiences, ups and downs and whatever else. I would, you know, I'd just love to like just have a list of questions just to rattle off to him, you know. But yeah, I think Denzel first, Will Smith second.
yeah. Equalizer 3 is coming out pretty soon, or it might be even out already as well. It's a great movie
Yeah,
series.
I'm trying to talk my wife into watching that with me at some point, but if not, I've got a backup.
Yeah. Um, all right. So what would you say you're most grateful for and why?
uh, I think most grateful for. I think I feel like I'm in a very good position that I sometimes take for granted. In terms of that I'm in a position where I can follow my passion in help, most importantly, helping others, but also I can manage my own time. I can, you know, I can work on my own self-development, and which will help feed the funnel of helping others. So I think the position I'm in with my job, like, you know, for the last few years, I'm always grateful for that. I'm always grateful for having the freedom of just learning and helping others, helping myself. Yeah, I think that's something that you can sometimes easily be neglected.
Yeah. One thing I actually forgot to ask you earlier is did you find, I'm guessing you did, like the sales training before PT, was that very helpful coming into the industry?
What the of getting of the pre becoming a
Of like
PT?
being in sales basically. Was that helpful then when you started selling in personal training?
Ah, I see what you're saying. I think to a degree, in terms of speaking to lots of different people, I think you're kind of, yeah, you kind of you can build kind of a bit more of a confidence around that. You have to be versatile. You have to deal with different situations, all of that kind of stuff. So, but the thing that I disliked when I got into David Lloyd was it was very much a numbers game, in terms of like I kind of left sales because I didn't want to be in sales anymore, and I went into PT into a mainstream gym, and it was very much kind of playing this numbers game of like, how many sessions have you got in this week and how many signups have you got and all of this kind of stuff. And for me, it just kind of like it's turning people into numbers, you know, and sort of, and, you know, obviously you need sales, you need to talk to people, you need to make money. And it is a facet of it, of course, of any business. But I feel like the way that was the kind of focus at the start of every week was like, how much money are you bringing into this business, basically. So yeah, I think in certain aspects, I think of speaking to lots of different people, like I was saying, like that kind of versatility around having lots of conversations. The more people you speak to, the more adaptable you can be. So, and I think from taking, you know, that was a very positive part of the job that I had previously. So taking that into a scenario where I was actually helping people physically with what they wanted to achieve, I think it just, yeah, it married up really nicely.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked to quite a few people who they were in sales beforehand. In particular, I think door to door sales as well, that builds a lot of resilience of just getting the door shut in your face, you know, because starting your own business is hard. Like in the fitness industry, it's hard to build a sustainable business. So I think like being used to people saying no or ignoring you, which you'll get a lot of that in sales. It's good training for personal training as well. Last question, man. If you could put anything on a billboard in somewhere like Times Square, what would you say and why?
I think probably two words. Remain curious. I think that's something that I think since, you know, being that PT in the gym, that, you know, chucking weights around and wanting to be bigger, wanting to be stronger, focused on aesthetics, kind of like it was quite a narrow-minded approach. And I feel like the curiosity that I've had, you know, coming across people like Ida Portal, like Alex Nino, Jason Round, who I worked with for a little while, Tom Merrick, all of these people that have kind of like sparked up enough curiosity in me to feel like there is something else out there. And that something doesn't necessarily stop. There's always something to learn. There's always something you can improve at. So I feel like if I could spread a message to, you know, lots of people, I think it would just be being open-minded, remain curious. It doesn't stop.
Nice, man. I've done like almost 80 episodes, and I think that's my favorite one so far. So well done on that.
Oh, amazing. Thanks so much. Appreciate
I
that. It's been
love it.
great.
Yeah. So, mate,
No, thank you. I really appreciate your time and having fun. It's been great.
yeah, remain curious. That's like a really super simple, but it's just that's a great tagline. So Ben, like for people who are listening, where can people learn more about you? Like if you offer coaching, or where are you most active? If it's websites or Instagram, or yeah, just let us know.
Yeah, typically Instagram. Yeah, Instagram is probably the main place where I'll share stuff. So it's Ben Colgate PT. So that's kind of where you'll see, a lot of ideas that I share on there. I think, yeah, mainly like you know, based around like movement, like different drills. Like I share quite a lot of what my own training is on my stories and stuff. So if anyone's ever interested in what I'm actually up to, sort of mostly day to day, then I normally put bits on there. I've got a website as well, which is bencolgate.com, which just houses like just information about how I can help people. I do a lot of in-person training, but more steering into more like online, of just kind of using that base really of just reaching more people and just helping people in more ways. So yeah, you can kind of reach me in those places.
Awesome, man. I'll link all that in the show notes, mate. So appreciate you jumping on today. Okay.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.